Kuala Terengganu is widely known as one of the centre of Malaysia's traditional batik industry. Rich in cultural and heritage, batik from Kuala Terengganu showcases intricate patterns, vibrant colours, and unique artistic expressions that reflect the identity of the local community. For generations, batik production has not only preserved traditional craftsmanship but has also contributed significantly to the local economy and tourism sector. Behind the beauty and elegance of batik fabric lies a complex production process involving various dyes and chemicals. As the industry continues to grow, concerns have emerged regarding its environmental impact, particularly on the water quality. Wastewater generated during the dyeing process and introduce pollutions into nearby water bodies if not managed properly. Therefore, understanding the relationship between the batik productions and environmental sustainability is becoming increasingly important. This study focuses on comparing the effect of natural and chemical batik dyes on water pollution in batik production in Kuala Terengganu. Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Asma Dana binti Muhammad Asri with the metric number E24A3215 from the Bachelor of Applied in Science Environmental Sustainability Science with Honour, Faculty Earth Science, University Malaysia Kelantan. Today, I would like to present my mini project proposal for the subject EFT2143 Research Methodology and Scientific Writing entitled Comparison of Natural Dye and Chemical Dye Towards Water Pollution Activities in Kuala Terengganu. This study focuses on the batik industry in Kuala Terengganu, where dyes plays an important role in producing colourful textiles. However, the use of different types of dyes may have a different impact on the environment, especially on the water pollution. That is why this study aims to compare natural dye and chemical dye in terms of their contribution towards the water pollution. Batik is a key cultural and economic symbol in Kuala Terengganu, where dyes play an important role in determining their quality and value. Chemical dyes are widely used due to their brightness, durability, and low cost. However, they also contribute to water pollution and environmental harms. In contrast, natural dyes are more environmentally friendly, but they are less durable and have a limited color variety. Despite the environmental risks, many producers still prefer chemical dyes in production. Therefore, this study compares both natural and chemical dyes in terms of sustainability, environmental impacts, and color quality to encourage more eco-friendly batik production. Moving on to the next part, which is a background of study. As we all know, batik is not only a cultural heritage in Malaysia, especially in Terengganu, but it also plays an important role in the local economy and the tourism industry. In the process of production, two types of dyes are commonly used, which are natural and chemical dyes. Natural dyes are generally more environmentally friendly, but they tend to be the less durable and require more time in the dyeing process. On the other hand, chemical dyes are more efficient and produce a bright color, but they can contribute to environmental problems. One of the main concerns is the water pollution caused by untreated wastewater from the batik production, which can negatively affect aquatic life and the surrounding of the ecosystem. Therefore, this study is carried out to compare the impact of natural and chemical dyes on the water pollution in order to support more sustainability practice in the batik industry. The batik industry in Kuala Terengganu continues to expand, driven by the strong demand of the handmade textile. However, this growth comes with environmental concerns as the dyeing process generates wastewater containing a pollution such as the COD, BOD, and the various toxic substances, particularly from the chemical dyes. Although chemical dyes are preferred due to their affordability and the vibrant color output, their extensive use has been a major contributor to the water pollution in the study area. On the other hand, natural dyes are often introduced as a greener alternative, but there is still a limited clear evidence on how effective they are in reducing water pollution when compared to the chemical dyes. This gap highlights the need for a more focused comparison between both types of dye in terms of their environmental impact. Moving on to the objectives of this study, there are three main focuses. First, the study aims to examine the environmental impacts of both natural and chemical dyes on the water pollution during the batik production process. Second, it seeks to compare the level of contribution of each type of dye towards the water pollution. And finally, this study aims to determine which dye is more environmentally friendly for production batik in Kuala Terengganu. In terms of the scope of this study, the focus is on comparing natural and chemical dyes used in batik production in Kuala Terengganu. This study specifically looks at the environmental impact, with an emphasis on water pollution caused by wastewater from the dyeing process. However, it does not cover other types of pollution, such as air or soil pollution. It also focuses only on the dyeing stage of the batik production, as this stage is considered the main contributor to the wastewater generation. In terms of significance of this study, it plays an important role in highlighting the environmental impacts of using natural and chemical dyes in batik production, particularly in Kuala Terengganu. The findings of this study can help raise awareness about water pollution caused by dye wastewater and at the same time encourage the adoption of more environmentally friendly alternative within the industry. In addition, this study may also serve as a useful reference for future research related to the sustainable practices in the batik industry, especially in balancing economic needs with the environmental responsibility. The study area of this research is Kuala Terengganu, which is recognized as one of the main centers of batik production in Malaysia. Geographically, Kuala Terengganu is located at the mouth of the Terengganu River on the east coast of Peninsula Malaysia. Facing the South China Sea, it is also the state capital and a royal city of Terengganu, situated approximately 440 kilometers northeast of Kuala Lumpur. This makes it a strategic location for batik activities, particularly in relation to the local production and industry development. Based on previous study, natural dye are widely recognized as eco-friendly, biodegradable, and low in toxicity, making them a more sustainable option in textile production. In contrast, the batik industry in Kuala Terengganu plays an important role in both cultural preservation and economic development, but it still heavily relies on chemical dyes. Chemical dyes are known for their vibrant colors, durability, and affordability. However, they also have several limitations, such as a poor color fastness in certain conditions and a more complex production process. More importantly, they contribute to environmental issues by producing a toxic wastewater. Previous research also highlight that batik wastewater contain a high level of COD and BOD, which significantly affect water quality and aquatic ecosystem. However, there is still a clear research gap, as limited studies have directly compared the environmental impact of natural and chemical dyes in a batik production. For the methodology of this study, a comparative research design was adopted to compare wastewater from natural dyes and chemical dyes. The study was conducted in Kuala Terengganu, which is a well-known batik production area. In terms of materials, several equipment were used, including a sample bottle, a pH meter, BOD apparatus, COD test kit, glove, and face mask, as well as an ice box for sample preservation. For data collections, observations were carried out during the dye process, followed by the collection of wastewater sample from both natural and chemical dye process. The water quality analysis focused on key parameters, which are pH, BOD, and COD. These results were then compared to determine the level of water pollution between the two dye types. This flowchart illustrates the overall step-by-step process of how this research was carried out. The study began with identifying the problem statement, which focuses on the environmental impact of natural and chemical dyes in batik productions. And then, from there, the research objective were developed to guide the direction of the study and ensure that the main focus is clearly defined. Next, a literature review was conducted together and analysed previous study related to dye usage, wastewater, and environmental effects in the batik industry. After that, the methodology was designed, which includes a comparative approach between the natural and chemical dyes. This was followed by field observation, where the batik dyeing process was observed to understand how wastewater is generated in the real practice. Then, sample collection was carried out, involving the wastewater sample from the both natural and chemical dye processes. The collected samples were then analysed using key water quality parameters, which helped to determine the level of pollution. Finally, all the results and findings were compiled and interpreted to form for the conclusion of the study. This Gantt chart represents the timeline of key stages and milestones achieved throughout the research process. The study began in week 3, where the research proposal was developed and officially approved, marking the starting point of the project. In week 5, the literature review was complete, allowing a better understanding of previous studies related to the natural and the chemical dyes. By week 7, observation of the batik dyeing process was carried out to gain a real-world insight into the production process. Following that, in week 8, sample collection was completed, involving wastewater sample from both natural and chemical dye processes. In week 10, water analysis was conducted, focusing on the key parameters such as the pH, BOD, and COD. Next, in week 12, the collected data was analysed and interpreted to identify patterns and differences between the two types of dye. Finally, by week 16, the final report was completed and submitted, marking the conclusion of the research project. This section outlines the estimate budget required to carry out the research activity for this study. Firstly, the materials and PPE. The item includes sampling bottle of 500 ml, glove, face mask, and an ice box with ice pack to ensure proper sample handling and preservation. The total cost for this category is RM86. Next, for the transportations. The budget is allocated for travel to the batik production site in Terengganu to collect a sample of wastewater, with an estimated cost of RM50. For laboratory analysis, tests such as the COD, BOD and pH were conducted for 8 samples each to assess the water quality parameter. This section has the highest cost amounting to RM544. Lastly, for documentation and other expenses including printing, photocopying, stationery and miscellaneous costs. The total estimate cost is RM35. Overall, the study budget covers all essential components needed to ensure the research is carried out effectively and systematically. In conclusion, this study shows that natural dyes are more environmentally friendly, while chemical dyes contribute more to water pollution. Therefore, the batik industry should adopt sustainable practices by using eco-friendly dyes and improving wastewater management. Overall, this study promotes environmental awareness and supports the sustainable development of the batik industry.